past the compressor.
You were the chosen one!
Something truly special.
Congratulations. You are being rescued.
Revenge is not the Jedi way.
I am no Jedi.
The ability to speak might not make you intelligent, but we're going to try to prove otherwise. This is the Clashing Sabers podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon, and I'm here with my co-hosts. First of all, we have the man who makes Axel Greylark look like a fine English gentleman. It's...
Oh my gosh, that better be Davor you're pitching. And not me.
I mean, you usually come first, but as I was saying it, I was like, this does feel more Davor.
Oh, God. I'll take it. Hey, it's Drew. How are you today, Brandon?
I'm fantastic. I'm exhausted because it's the first full week of school, and it's been an adventure, but I'm glad to be here talking some Star Wars to close out the week.
Good.
And, of course, you mentioned Davor, and he is our stalwart of Coruscant's underworld, and, of course, Yaddle's best friend. So, Davor, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Guys, I love you, but... you're not that important. If you guys just heard that other voice, That is our special guest. Look, I love you guys, but
that's fair.
But we have the absolutely fantastic honor of having a guest on tonight to join us. Miss Lydia Kang is on with us today. Welcome.
Hello. Hi. How's it going?
It is good. You know, we had some traditional tech problems to start the show out, and now we just get to smooth sail the rest of the way. As Han would say, we're all fine here. We're fine. How are you? So yeah, no, we're gonna be having a lot of fun on here tonight, and this is gonna be kind of, I guess you could say, an interview of sorts, but really we just wanted to have Lydia on and talk Star Wars and what she's into lately, and just have a good old Clashing Sabers time. So, if you guys are new to the show, of course, maybe you're here listening for the first time, we have a bunch of podcasts on the network, so make sure you're subscribed so you get all of those in one feed. But more importantly, want to throw out our Patreon before we get started today. That Patreon goes 100% to supporting our nonprofit to put Star Wars books into classrooms across the country, which Miss Kang has been kind enough to contribute to our upcoming fundraiser, which, of course, you'll have more information coming on our socials and on the feed here as that starts to develop and come to fruition. So we appreciate all of you guys who are over there on Patreon. And there are some changes with Apple subscriptions to Patreon that Amanda and I are figuring out. So make sure you're keeping track of any alerts you get from Patreon in that regard. And we'll keep you in the loop as well on what we find out about those changes. It shouldn't affect too much, but we'll do our best to communicate those things. So that housekeeping out of the way, like I said, we just want to have a fun conversation tonight, Lydia, and just jam on some Star Wars. You know, it's always a fun time to just get to hang out with your friends and jam on some Star Wars. So tell us, you know, what is your Star Wars story? Like, we all, as fans here that we are, we're like, we look at the authors, we look at the creators, and we're like, man, they're living the dream. How do you go from you know, kid Lydia to becoming a Star Wars author? What was that journey like?
Oh my God. When you say it like that, it just sounds so unreal.
It's a little unreal.
Because I just think of like, you know, kid Lydia, and I'm just like, she would have never guessed in a gazillion years. One, that I would be writing like professionally, or two, that I'd be writing like for Star Wars. So that is just really, I mean, every now and then I have to really stop and pinch myself because I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. This is so weird, in the best way of weird. But I guess this all started back in 1977. I was 6 years old and I saw Star Wars for the first time, like everybody else in the world. And I loved it. I loved it so much, and saw all the other movies, and it just kind of became a part of my childhood. There wasn't a time when, you know, I wasn't watching a movie or it wasn't on TV during the holidays. And I think I watched that original trilogy, I don't know, 20 times, because it was just on all the time when I was home for the holidays and stuff like that. And then, so, you know, skip forward many, many years, I go to med school and residency, and I become a doctor. And somewhere in the middle of that, I decided I was going to start writing, and I published a couple books. And in the midst of that, Lucasfilm reached out to me, and they were like, "Hey, by any chance, would you like to write a short story for this Empire Strikes Back anthology?"
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, and I don't know, I don't know why they picked me. I mean, I know, I get the feeling, I know now enough about what happens behind the scenes that they really do love the idea of having some fresh voices um, on the roster, especially for, these anthologies where they have, 40 stories to write, and I don't know why they picked me. I still don't know how they found me, because my young adult books, like, they didn't sell very well. They were science fiction. And I loved writing them, and um, but I was not like some, like, New York Times bestselling author. I think my most bestselling books at the time were like an adult historical fiction that took place in 1918, and a book on like quack medicine that I co-wrote with a friend of mine, which is nonfiction. So yeah, they found me. They offered me to write in this anthology, and my I apologize to people who maybe have heard the story, but I initially, in my mind, I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. And I was so scared to write a story. And I was talking to my husband about it, and he is also a huge Star Wars fan. And he was like, he's like, have you lost your marbles? Of course you're going to say yes. And I'm like, but I was like, what if, I was like, it's so easy for you to say, you don't have to write it. I'm like, what if I get it wrong? What if I don't? I had so much respect for the people who wrote Star Wars. And I have so much respect for the fans and the people who spend so much time with the lore and the just everything. And I was like, I don't want to let anybody down. I don't want to be yelled at, and I don't want to do a bad job. I was so nervous about doing it, and my husband was like, this is a once in a lifetime chance. You can't say no. And so before I said yes, what I did was I just rewatched The Empire Strikes Back, and I was like, let's just sit with this for a little bit, like, because the whole point of writing in the anthology is like, pick this side character and see what they're thinking. So I'm watching this movie, and like very early on, like, when they're on Hoth, I'm like, wait a second, there is a doctor in this movie. And
Wow.
I was like, I was like, 21B is a surgical droid, medical droid. And he's, this is the droid that puts on Luke's, artificial hand at the end of the movie. And immediately I was like, I can write from the perspective of a doctor. I can do that. This is what I do every day. And as soon as I realized that was a perspective I could do, I told them I would say yes, but this is what I would pitch to you. What's going through the doctor's mind when he is healing Luke at the end of the movie and putting on this artificial hand right after he finds out that Darth Vader is his dad.
Yeah.
And I remembered watching the movie, and I was like, and I hadn't noticed this before, but I noticed on this rewatch, I was like, right before the scene, he is devastated. He just found out this horrible, conflicting news. And then at the end of the movie, he's like looking out, the window of this medical frigate, and, Leia's at his side, and his face he's peaceful. He has hope in his heart. And you're like, what happened between being devastated and like looking forward and to, trying to make things better? And I was like, he was with a doctor. So I was like, I am going to dig deep in this scene and figure out what was the change that happened with him so he could move on, or at least start to heal a little bit. And that's how it all started.
That's awesome. I'd never like really thought of that scene from that perspective of like the healing aspect of it. And it's
I hadn't either, because it's such a blip. It's really fast. He's getting his hand put on. He gets his little finger prick test to see if his sensation's okay. Closes his hand, and that's it. But you miss there's a scene missing. where, you're sort of wondering like what was going on in his head. And I gotta tell you, it was so much fun to be able to explore and visit with that and take him through that that transformation. So I really enjoyed writing it. I loved it. I was really scared too, but they, the whole team, the editorial team, they sort of walked me through like, okay, you can't say this and you have to capitalize that. And, when you have like, so there are all these like rules of writing Star Wars that I hadn't known. And so they taught me about a lot of that stuff, which was really fun. And they're very kind. And I was like, okay, that was cool. And I was like, done. I got to write something in the Star Wars universe. And then a year later, they asked me to write for the High Republic. And it was kind of the same thing. They're like, hey, Lydia. They like reached out through my agent. And then once again, I was like, no freaking way. I'm not writing for you again.
So this is something we've kind of like thrown around in the fan community a little bit, but kind of the idea of the anthologies being kind of a tryout more or less to get a full novel, do you feel like it was kind of that way for you, where like, because your story in Empire Strikes Back, from a certain point of view, it hits, and you had a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of pressure in where you were at in the story. You're at the end of The Empire Strikes Back. You've got to convey that hope, like you said. You're coming after 30 plus other stories, that you're having to capture the reader again after they've gone through so many different journeys and adventures, which is not an easy task to do. Do you think like that was part of why they gave you that second call?
I mean, I think maybe that had something to do with it. I knew there was a lot of pressure. I didn't know where the story was going to end up, but of course it makes sense that it was at the end of the anthology. And I knew I had to stick the landing. I was really nervous about that. And when I wrote it, I wanted to incorporate so many elements of Star Wars that I loved. I loved the seriousness and the depth of emotion, and also the occasional lightheartedness. And so I tried really hard, and I was very proud of it. I think what also helped was that I had written, like 8 other books before that. And so I had I had a track record of being in the industry and being able to deliver manuscripts on time. I think that's very helpful.
That matters, yeah.
I think I'm not an asshole. I think that helps. Nobody wants to work with it. I'm sorry. I'm going to be cussing. That's okay. So
we have a button for that. You're good.
Oh, do you? Okay, good. Just bleep me out whenever you need to. And there were other people who I had worked with before. And so like Justina Ireland and I were in the same debut author class from way back in 2013. So we knew each other for 10 years. We didn't work directly with each other a lot, but we were sort of in the same room, so to speak. Tessa Gratton and I had met, and so we knew each other. Although she wasn't an author, she wasn't a Star Wars author at the time. I knew Zoraida Cordova. Again, we were just sort of all like kind of in the same circles because of the young adult world, and I think because of that, it helped to know that people were like, she's a professional. It's not like she's only written one book or not written anything at all. I'd already been sort of tested, I guess, to a certain degree. And I think that I'm guessing that had something to do with the invitation. But I don't know. I mean, I get questions all the time about like, how do you break into the writing world and into writing, Star Wars IP? And Kevin Scott actually has a really lovely write-up about this in one of his newsletters. So any of you guys who are interested in it, it's in his Instagram or Threads feed from like, I want to say like a month ago, 2 months ago, where he talks about you basically have to be writing all the time. And you have to get your stuff out there, and you got to be a professional, and you got to be able to work on a really intense deadline. And that helps. And you have to be, obviously, it helps to be a huge Star Wars fan, But as we know, it doesn't. You aren't always a Star Wars fan and working in the Star Wars universe. Sometimes it happens that way. So, so yeah, I just feel really lucky that it happens, and I'm aware that some of the luck is self-made. Right? You have to kind of be out there. It helps a lot to to get into this world and already have like an established career.
When they came to you with the High Republic pitch, what was that like? Because it seems like so much of Phase 2, which you were involved with, was already in the works before we had even gotten the Light of the Jedi in our hands. So what is it like to jump into that halfway through a project when the project's barely out into the public's eyes?
It was definitely a little stressful because I had read Light of the Jedi, and so then of course I went like into it. I started reading like everything I could in Phase 1, and I was like, the quality of the writing was so good, you know. Claudia and Charles and Kevin and everybody else, Daniel, I mean, like everybody had written so well, and I was like, wow, okay, bar is really high here, and how am I going to do this? But not only that, but I had to immerse myself in a world that they had built, that they had created, and made sure that I got the tone right, that I was going to keep this Phase 2, which was, really odd because it was this jump back in time. So it's like prequel.
Right.
And having to keep that energy up, so that if somebody walked into it fresh and had never read anything, they would love it, and people who were loving Phase 1 could jump into it and also still feel that connection. So there was a lot on the line about it. I feel like I did a lot of work and research to make sure I was doing it the right way. For sure, Cataclysm, which is, the sequel to Convergence, and then we have, it was one of the hardest books I've ever written.
Wow.
So I will definitely admit that. One, because it wasn't me alone in a room thinking up a story that was just of my own making, and where the world building all belonged to me. It didn't belong to me. And so I had to work within certain parameters. So that was a little bit new for me. And I had to connect everything that Zoraida and George Mann had been writing in their 2 novels to make sure everything was connected. So there's like conversations going on. Cavan Scott was writing the young adult book that was happening in the timeline at the same time as Cataclysm. And so we had to make sure our things matched up. So the collaboration aspect was totally new for me on this level. I mean, it wasn't just like talk to this person and make sure things line up. It was like talk to 5 people and, all the time about making sure things line up. When it wasn't like they were like, okay, our books are done and here, make sure they match up. It's like we were all writing them at the same time. So it was just...
That's wild.
It was bananas in the best way. It was chaos, and just amazing kind of chaos, like so much creative like stuff happening all at the same time. So that was really cool, quite stressful. I also had never written a book that had like 8 main characters, which
there's a lot happening in that book.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening on that book, and granted, part of that's my own fault, because I kind of chose to have like 8 main characters. I could have, I was like, let's have like, I want scenes with, the chancellors to sort of show the political side of things. I want scenes with the Jedi because we've been following them. I want scenes from, the princess and Prince of Iram and Arano. And and also I just want Yaddle in there. So I'm just gonna make a whole storyline with Yaddle because I just want Yaddle in there. And they let me. So I did that. And yeah, it was really hard. Like I had to write out a storyboard, and I had like Post-it notes all over the place. They were color coded, and oh my gosh, it was hard. It was really difficult.
Well, and it's like you took the challenging task, and then by having multiple main characters just made it harder on yourself, which I kind of love as somebody who tends to do that himself. So you have these characters, that are more or less created for you, that you're picking up, and they've got these histories, they've got, both, these characters in the High Republic, and then even taking on a character from the films like Yaddle, even though, Yaddle didn't have a lot of content, before your books. She's got a lot more now because she's finally getting the justice that she deserves. But like,
Yes.
what is that? What's that experience like? Like, how is that different from when you get to build your own characters?
Well, I think in some ways it wasn't too bad because the characters, many of them, not all of them, but many of them already, pre-existed. I could sort of look back and be like, all right, this might be a little bit easier because they've got a personality, they've got a history, and I just have to make it work. And so in some ways it wasn't too difficult because, I don't know, I guess maybe some people might have difficulty with it, but I found it pleasant to sort of be like, okay, I have something to work with. Like, I guess it's sort of like when you're building something, you're building a house, and somebody's sort of like, well, we put 3 walls up, and all you have to do is a 4th wall, and you're like, great, I think I can do this. It helps to have the structure there that's pre-existing. But what you haven't been given is, and a lot of people don't realize this, but it's not like, for us, and God, I might be giving away secrets here that I'm not supposed to give away, but like, it's not like Lucasfilm was like, here's the outline, now just write the thing. Like with ghostwriting, for example, or with other kinds of IP, there can be situations where they're like, here's your like 10-page detailed outline of what the story is going to be, and now you just actually write the book. So you don't have any freedom to really create the characters or decide if they're going to go left or right, or decide if they're going to have like a this like terrible experience or something like that. Like, it's already there for you. But for me, for writing Star Wars, it was so much was left up to me. It was really very respectful, I think, of the creators and of the writers, of sort of like, you have to write the second book. It's going to be cataclysmic. It's going to be a big deal. And we know all roads lead to Dalna. And that was kind of like all they gave me. They were like, all roads lead to Dalna. Have fun, Lydia. And I was like, Jesus, okay. I'm just going to make this really bad. Like, I'm going to make this really bad, and it's going to be horrible and difficult. But like, I got to make sure that this launches so that phase 1, so like Light of the Jedi, can happen, and it was a lot. It was to do, and I tried really hard to like make sure that I got all the elements in that I wanted. I wanted people to have a really good read. I wanted them to have a really good ride, and I wanted them to be a little devastated by the end of the book. And yeah, but a lot of that was left up to me, which was wonderful. Like, it was, I know that other people have had different experiences writing for different IP. But this was great. And it's why I continue to enjoy, writing for Lucasfilm. It's, why I hope to, keep writing for them in the future.
So something that, I've always been in awe about you, Lydia, is that, like, you're, of course, an author, so we've been talking about, but you're also a practicing medical doctor, and, you have a family and stuff. And so from the outside, I just look at that and I'm like, how? It's like, it's so, like, I try to, like, I try to do the off, like, avocationally, like, writing some short stories, while holding down my, like, office job, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna have time this week. It's like, I can't even imagine, like, juggling, like, that much. So I'm just like, if you don't mind, like, talk a little bit about just, like, your, like, ethic, and, like, how do you, like, structure that? Like, how do you make the time and the space to kind of, give to all those sides of your life the kind of attention that you want to?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, so the first thing that people probably need to know is that I'm not a full-time physician, because if I was, I would not be able to write the volume of stuff that I do in the time periods that I do. I work a couple days a week, and the rest of the time I'm at home and I'm writing. And I have the kind of job that is flexible in that, like, I can check in remotely to work. So, like, on a given day, like today's Friday, I was home all day, and I checked into the electronic medical record multiple times today, probably 4 or 5 times today. And I fielded calls from my patients. I fielded calls from my nurses, took care of a bunch of things. And then in between that, I sat in front of my computer and I procrastinated writing a short story, which is probably due today, but will probably get turned in on Monday. And I just procrastinated. I was just like, let's check the news. And I'm like doing that. And I'm like, let's check socials. I'm like doing that. I'm like, oh my God, Lydia, just get back to work. Like, write 500 words, just do something. But I'm very responsive to deadlines. So when there is a deadline looming, I get my butt in the chair and I actually get it done. So somehow it works. And strangely enough, the two jobs that I have, they complement each other well because they have completely different stressors and they have other ways of sort of releasing stress from each other. So for example, when like doctor work gets a little bit too intense, I get to escape into a wonderful fantasy world of my choosing when I'm writing. And then when the publishing world gets difficult, and it is an absolute roller coaster, and the lows can be very low in publishing, I go to clinic and I take care of people who are sick or depressed or have these problems, and I try to make them feel better. And it's really, really grounding in a lot of ways. It sort of like resets the whole focus of like, this is what's going on in the world. Don't forget, like, publishing is not the end all and be all of everything. So yeah, they balance each other out really well. I'm pretty lucky that it works okay for me.
I love that both of your careers are kind of like they make people feel emotions of some sort. Like you heal and you help people feel a certain way, and you write stories that get people feeling so many ways, like just so many ways. And
that is true.
Like
the funny thing that's like interesting about both jobs is like you can't please everybody, right? Mm-hmm. So you could do your best writing something, and there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like it, or they just wish you'd done something different, or it's not their taste. And it's the same thing with like working in healthcare, is that you will not always be able to make people happy. They might not like your style. They might need to move on to another doctor. And yeah, it's just weirdly in parallel that way.
Well, but I love that Star Wars is doing that, where they're not trying to fit all of the authors into a box, and just because this is High Republic, we have to have this certain type of author, or just because this is, the short story anthologies, we have to have these kind of writers. It's a really diverse group, and we even each of us on our show here, we have our different favorite authors and ones that we don't prefer, and even within those, there's subcategories of like, but I do like this book and I don't like this book, or whatever it may be. And it's just, I appreciate that Star Wars is creating this space where I've always said they need to take risks, and I don't want to like everything, because if I do like everything, that means the whole thing is pointed at pleasing me and just people like me, and that's not going to continue StarArs on forever. We need that diversity. So when you're writing for the IP, you talked about there being pressure. Do you kind of give yourself a little bit of freedom with that understanding that not everybody is going to like it, and you just have to tell your story?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I think too hard of like, I am writing to please everybody. Like I think if you are in that headspace to write, you will be paralyzed by indecision and a lack of creativity. I think you do have to take chances, and you learn very early on writing that you cannot please everybody. And I think that there's a relief that comes with that. It's sort of like, okay, well, who am I trying to please? And ultimately, you're kind of trying to please yourself, right? You're really trying to, like, you're writing for yourself. I'm writing for the Star Wars fan in me that loves the dramatic action, that loves the fight scenes, that loves dog fights, that loves these life and death situations and some of the black and white of good versus evil, but also the lighthearted, the funny things, the quips and the little moments of comic relief and those little bits of romance when they pop up. So I was writing for that fan. That was me, and I was hoping that the things that I love so much about Star Wars will blanket like a huge number of readers that kind of feel the same way. And I knew that someone won't like them, and that's fine. But it's very hard. I think you have to be very careful not to get hung up on pleasing everybody or expecting like, oh, they're going to hate this. It's just a really poor way to be creative, is just starting with your feet already stuck in these like buckets of concrete. You just have to try to leave that behind and let loose. And that's not an easy thing to do, honestly. I guess you kind of learn after a while. You get into a groove where you're sort of like really excited and sort of loving it. You just sort of like pitch yourself forward and just sort of dive off that cliff and just keep going. Because that sort of exciting feeling, that's what totally gets me going when I'm writing anything,
Yeah, you've got to care about it yourself, or otherwise other people aren't going to care about it at all, And at the end of the day, I like that perspective of you just have to write it somewhat for yourself. And I'm just thinking the whole time you're describing everything you like in Star Wars, I'm like, your favorite character you wrote has to be Axel Greylark, right? Because like he embodies all of those things.
He was so much. Oh my God, he's so naughty. He was so much fun to write.
That's the perfect word. That is the perfect word.
He is. He's a naughty boy, and I loved writing him. He's we're so different. So I felt a little bit more distance to Axel. I think that I felt a lot closer to writing Yaddle and to writing Chancellor Greylark. And I think part of it is because, I'm not a young person anymore, and I pay a lot of attention to politics, and I read the news, and there's just a lot going on in the world that's just not right in front of you. It just goes so far. It reaches so far beyond you. And I wanted that sort of sensation and that to be reflected in these two characters. The sort of conflicts that they have, the wisdom that they have, but also that feeling that like, as you get older and you get wiser, you also realize like you just don't know a lot. You don't know as much as you wish you did, or what your what your problems are. Like, what you were doing wrong. You're able to see those mistakes. And I think there's something really beautiful and horrifying about coming to terms with that. And so that those were two aspects that I really loved writing about in these two characters. And I would say if you told me like to pick out what were my favorite characters for writing the whole book, it would definitely be Yaddle and Chancellor Greylark, and not Axel, because he's so naughty. I was mad at him the whole time. So
So why Yaddle? What's the connect? Like, you've brought her up multiple times. I want to know from you, what is it about Yaddle that draws you in?
she's like, well, she was like a bit of a mystery to me. She shows up in the first movies. You see her sort of, and you're like, what is going on with her? What is going on with the female Yoda, which is, people would call her sometimes. And I sort of thought about her and thought about what kind of legacy she might have. And I knew that she had some sort of experience she did a lot of teaching of younglings and things like that. And I'm like, I could never be a teacher. I mean, I am a teacher. I teach medical students, but I don't teach young people, and really young people. And I find that really frustrating. Like, how on earth does she keep it together? And so there was part of me just sort of playing with that idea, but also with the fact that she doesn't get much screen time. She doesn't get much time on the page in the Star Wars universe. And I'm like, if they let me, interestingly, so I wrote her in to the book as a very, very minor character. And after I'd done that, I think it was after like my first draft, I got a lot of commentary. They were just like, more Yaddle, please. And I was
Interesting.
like,
Ah,
really?
okay.
Really? And I was so excited about that. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so great. Um, and so I rewrote her storyline and I turned her into a much bigger character. And so you see us like, dropping in on her throughout the book. Uh, and so it was really lovely to get that encouragement. And I had so much fun with her and also with her youngling, Sippa, who's also very naughty, but so gifted. And I wanted to, um, I really wanted their relationship um, to be played out throughout the book because you know it's not a cool thing to have children in war, but it happens, and I wanted to explore that and see what happens when sort of like some decisions are made and they turn into really scary situations. But I very much enjoyed writing that sort of duo. Um, and yeah, they just like basically like why Yaddle, because they let me. It's really the answer.
If they're gonna let you, they're gonna let you.
Were you aware at the time then that Yaddle would appear in like 3 or 4 other major entries in the Star Wars world then? Because she was
No.
in the Tales of the Jedi. She was in the Living Force featured heavily. So you were, while all these other guys are working on that, you just happen to bring up the same thing.
Yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea, and they didn't tell me. They weren't like, hey, by the way, Yaddle's gonna be these things, so make sure these
Really?
things sort of match up. They were just like, go, and I was like, all right, I'm going, and I like just did it, and there are powers that be that keep on top of these things. And so it's not like it's not like me and all of my editors were like in a silo. There's never a silo really
Sure.
when it comes to Star Wars. And so, but yeah, they were like, I never got any sort of correction that was just sort of like, Yaddle can't do this because we can't tell you why. And I was like, so like that didn't happen. Which means that I got to do what I did with Yaddle pretty, pretty much without any fences. And that was awesome. Like that was pretty fun. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, sort of across your writing career, both in Star Wars and outside Star Wars, like, who are some of your like inspirations, like some of your idols, like the people who you look to in terms of like the kind of stories they're telling or how they're telling them? Like, who are some of those folks, or who have been some of those folks for you?
Gosh, that's a good question. I I remember very early on when I was blogging, and this was when they told you needed to blog in order to become a writer. So this was like in the like the late aughts. Um, I remember Beth Revis's blog. She had a wonderful blog. She was very generous with what she was learning as she went through her writing journey. And her first book had come out. I think it's called Across the Universe. And I loved it. I thought it was so great. And she wrote science fiction with so much heart. And so she was somebody that I looked up to, um, not just because she was a great author, but because she was a great person. She really, um, she was just a genuinely very nice person and wanted to help other writers out there. And I think I had like just met her in passing. Like I think we'd met in person like once at a con, like for a split second. And but it was really cool when I saw that she was also writing for Star Wars. But she's always been somebody that I looked up to. I don't even know if she knows that I'm talking about her right now. We follow each other on social media and stuff like that. And but that was somebody I would say very early on in my career, before I'd ever gotten published, that I remembered, who's still sort of in my circle now, because of Star Wars, and she's still publishing and all that kind of stuff. So that's one person who comes to mind. Um, gosh, there's just I read like all over the place, and so
Right.
I've had some YA authors that I've really loved, like Jennifer Donnelly, who did a lot of historical novels that I really loved way back when, but I still love now. And there are historical writers that I love very much. Eric Larson, and oh gosh, I'm terrible when being put on the spot because there's so many people that I love. I feel like I want to walk up to my like bookshelves and just start like pointing at things and being like, I like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
I like this person,
We
so
have
many
no
people.
problem with that. We are here.
Yeah.
For that.
Yes, yes.
But I just like I have to say I've met a lot of people along the way. Oh, you know who was really lovely? Unfortunately, she died a couple years ago. Her name was Rachel Kane, and we actually shared the same virtual assistant, who's an absolute wonderful spark of a human being, Sarah. And but Rachel, I met her when I was just like a newbie author, and we were at the same event, and I sat down next to her with my books, and she sat down next to me with her books, and her line was like basically out the door. And she was so kind. She like bought my book, and she's like, I'm going to read your book on the way home. And she was like, I loved it. And she was so sweet with me. And it's the people that you remember who are just such wonderful human beings. And they just happen to be like fantastic writers. It's just, they make for such a wonderful existence in this job, because this job can be really harsh sometimes. And I have to also just give a shout out to all the High Republic authors, because I had to work with them a lot. And they have been amazing and so welcoming to me. And I was so nervous entering this sort of High Republic family because, these are the guys that like went to Skywalker Ranch and like thought all this up. And here I was coming in, in the second phase as a relatively new person in this Star Wars world. And they were just so generous with their time and so wonderful. And I remember very early on, like, Claudia Gray and Kevin Scott just reaching out to me and be like, if you have any questions, just like, here's my phone number, call me. Like, they were just so lovely. And everybody else that I eventually got to meet in person, and they've been wonderful. It's just a really fantastic group of beings. And it's, I'm lucky because I know it's got to happen that with like a large enough group of people working together under like some pretty vicious deadlines sometimes, that you're going to get some characters that are, or people that you just don't get along with or whatever. And like, I have been so happy working with everybody. I can't say enough about them. And Mike Siglain is amazing as well as our sort of fearless leader. He's been incredible. So I just feel so lucky. I really do. I'm not exactly sure how I got here.
I mean, you've had quite the journey. Yeah. Yeah, and it's so cool, like, to hear we've talked to other authors, both who have worked in the High Republic and otherwise, who have said like very similar things to what you have said, and it's just like it gives you goosebumps as a Star Wars fan to know that like people are looking out for each other, like the authors are looking out for each other. They are genuinely good people, and it makes the content more enjoyable when it's not only good, but the people are good and they care about it and they are invested in taking care of it. So I just find that, inspiring, I think would be the right word. And it shines through, in your work, but in the High Republic overall. I know there's been a lot of commentary among us, especially the hardcore nerds, who are like, what did they figured something out with this High Republic thing. Like, they figured out how to really make Star Wars the way that they want to make it, but still make it feel like something old, but something new. And I think that a lot of that has to go to the fact that they got the right people to make it, and they're putting the right people in the right positions to do that. And so that's just really cool.
Yeah, I think so. And you can tell, like, the care and love for these stories comes out so much when you talk to the authors in person. And I almost am like kind of jealous of the fans. I feel like if I was, 20 years younger and the High Republic had just come out, and I thought, wow, I can just immerse myself in this, in these books and everything, and actually go to cons and meet them and be on social media and have them actually respond to me. Like, I would have been like so happy. And to know that it was a really welcoming, really inclusive fandom, as well as really inclusive books. Like, I would have loved that. And so it's really cool to be on this side. But I'm also incredibly happy that we have this like voraciously enthusiastic fandom with these three sets of phases, and it's just the love is really it's palpable when you go and you meet people, and new books come out and people are like so excited. It's just wonderful. I've
That's
never experienced anything like it. It's been incredible.
that's great to hear. Just from our perspective over here, just because some of us on this show have made bold claims about the High Republic being probably the best Star Wars content since Return of the Jedi came out.
Oh my
So
God, that makes me want to cry. That's
well,
it's just incredible. Wow.
I can't help what's true. I only have two small questions because we want to be respectful of your time. The first one I have is how much of like the old Star Wars Legends stuff were you ever familiar with, and did any of that ever penetrate what you did with your High Republic work at all?
So my confession is that I have not read extensively at all, like in Star Wars. So everything that I really knew coming into writing Star Wars was all visual. Like it was all just
Really?
like yeah. No, I hadn't read like really much of anything. And my there was a lot on the screen that was sort of happening as the years went on. Like my son was super into Star Wars, and so he was watching the Clone Wars all the time. And so we actually used to have this game that we would play in the car, like we were on car rides, and I was trying to keep the kids entertained. And it was like guess what I'm thinking, but it was called I think it was called like animal, vegetable, Jedi. And like you had to guess what I was thinking, and it was going to be either an animal or it's going to be a vegetable or it's a Jedi. And so people would ask
Oh my
questions like,
gosh!
like,
Th-
do they have a
This is the
lightsaber? Yes. And they know immediately it's a Jedi. And they're like, duh,
this is the only
is
game
it
I'm playing on
purple?
road trips ever again. This is it.
Yeah. It was so funny. So yeah, we made up that. So this was like, it was always in the background in my house, but no, I hadn't read. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was also really, really reticent to write Star Wars. I was like, I don't deserve to be a writer if I haven't read everything, like everything that's out there. Like I was a very kind of
Hmm.
blanket, like, and then, and I took a little bit of a leap of faith, and I was like, let's just hope that I do this right. And I let's hope that I do it well. And again, a lot of it was the sort of respect. And I'm like, I respect the reader so much, and they have read more than I have. So how could I possibly be in here to write it? And then there was a little part of me that was like, if you know Star Wars well enough, um, and you have a respect for it, and you love it, I don't think that you necessarily need to be reading everything out there in order to just put something new on the page. And there was part of me that was like, I think there's something fresh about going into it kind of cold and just giving it a try. And so I did. That being said, like before I wrote the short story, I read the other like I was reading through the other anthologies just to get a feel for things. And so I started reading as soon as I had the opportunity. I was intaking thing. I was reading Claudia Gray stuff, and so I kind of immersed myself into it the second I realized I was going to be in it. But before that, no, I
Wow.
wasn't. I was
No, that's perfectly. That's excellent. I'm glad to hear that. And I'll let the other two guys go because this is my last one. And out of the Phase 1/Phase 3 characters, do you have a favorite, and why is it Avar Chris?
oh my god, she's so awesome. Um, the way that they have her sort of experiencing the force like it's a song, I thought was
Oh,
so brilliant. I thought that
So
was so
good.
we all
beautiful.
have the
Like
same
the
reaction.
first time, yeah. I mean, like when I first started reading that, like I remember getting goosebumps and being like, I could almost visualize what she was feeling. And I was like, this is incredible. And so she is like, she's incredible. She's such a great, great character. So I have nothing bad to say. I'm very excited for you guys to see what happens in Phase 3. So I'm not going to, but I'm not saying anything because
we
I
are
can't
we are
tell
very
you.
concerned about our saint Avar over here. Some of us will not be well if you guys do bad things to her.
Listen,
Yeah,
I know Vernestra Row is safe, so we're sitting pretty.
Just somebody tell Kevin Scott not to touch her for a little bit, and I'll be fine with that.
That's
He
so
has a
true.
track record,
You know, there are
and
all
it's
these
not...
memes. I saw this. My daughter found this random meme on Tumblr the other day, and it was like Loden Great Storm, like in the ground, and
no.
like everybody's standing over his grave, and they're all the High Republic authors. And they're like, hey, just so you know, like, don't get too attached to anybody because your High Republic authors are gonna kill them off. And I was like, that's kind of true. We do that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
It's funny because it's true. It's based in a lot of reality, so we're all going through it. Some of us more than others.
Yes, but I stand behind your guys' love of Avar. She's incredible. Just what a character. Love her.
On that subject of High Republic characters, we've talked about in this conversation about some of the great characters that you wrote in the context of Convergence. We've talked about Yaddle and Axel and Kyung Greylark. Is there a High Republic character that you didn't get to write that you're like, I would have liked taking a stab at, a story with that person?
Oh, let me see.
And why is it Vernestra Row? That's
well, Venestra is going to be written about, not by me. So I'm super happy about that.
Yes.
These books are going to come out. Justina's book is going to be out there. Oh my God, I cannot wait. That's going to be so good.
Listen, we stand Justina Ireland over here. So yes.
Yeah,
She's
she
another one. You
is.
gotta watch out though.
You do. Oh my God. Yeah. She sometimes she can be lethal with her pen, so you never know. But
no.
I'm not saying anything. I can't say anything, but it's the end of phase 3, so some people are going to have to kick the bucket. I'm just not going to tell you who.
It's some new blood pressure medication. That's what
I know. We're going to have some like yoga classes to go along with the reading of certain books, I think, just to get everybody's blood pressure down.
You just have a fold out of one of those Star Wars yoga things as a Barnes and Noble special edition.
I know. Seriously. Oh my God. And here's your blood pressure medication.
Yeah,
anxiety mess to take while you read this book because things will happen. But I'm so excited for you guys to read. It's going to be a little while before the next set of books come out, but it'll be well worth the wait, I promise.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. And I kind of like it at this pace that we're getting now where they're a little more spread out. I feel almost a little bad for the phase 2 authors. You guys wrote these amazing books and it all just came out so quickly that I felt like we didn't get to marinate it. And I'm super excited to go back and reread phase 2 in particular because phase 1 was out for a little while and you had chances to go revisit that. And then phase 2 just hit all so quickly. It was overwhelming in a great way. And so they were really back to back to back to back. And so there was, I'm glad that phase 3 is being stretched out a little bit, but it really does give, the fans the breathing room to absorb everyone as they come out and enjoy them. And I think that was a wise decision. I don't know how that decision got made, but I think it was a good idea. Yeah, I think it might have been a little bit of COVID mixed in there, causing some of the production and stuff. But regardless,
and I think it's also fan feedback. No question. We all listen to what you guys say. So, not completely. If you're,
I was gonna
go back and
I was gonna say,
can't tell us to.
Don't listen to everything we say.
No.
Listen.
We won't listen to everything, but if there's some sort of general, there are things that are listened to, and that's another thing that I love about this entire endeavor is that there is a relationship there. It's between the creators and the fans that I think has been very, organic in a good way. So that's been lovely, I have to say.
So then you, Lydia, as the Star Wars fan, they're listening to you. What's your dream story or character or anything of that nature in Star Wars that you want to write about?
Oh my gosh, my dream stuff.
Like what wakes you up at night and you go like, this is who I want to write about, or what?
I don't know. I don't know that I could answer that. Because I have some ideas, but I'm not allowed to share them with you. So
that's fair.
that's something.
That's honestly the best answer you could have given us, to be totally.
Yeah, I have thoughts and I have ideas, but I'm not allowed. I can't share them with you yet, and I would like to, but there's a lot in the air, and I don't know what's going on. So I do have a bunch of things that I'm in the process of writing, which is more short stories for Star Wars Insider, that it's part of Phase 3. And so a lot of my attention's sort of on that. And so part of me sort of like, I can't do anything except for figure out what the heck is happening with Joss and Pika. Because those are some of the characters that I'm writing about in those stories. So yeah, I will let you know.
Well, you have an open invitation to come let us know whenever you want to.
Okay. That sounds good. That sounds very good.
No, but this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to hop on and talk with us. And just it's a lot of fun for us as fans to be able to see kind of like what I call the other side of the quilt. You know, we all see the end product, but to see how it gets put together is really interesting. And like I mentioned before, like the care that you guys have for it is just a thread that has run through. We've talked to Claudia Gray and Kevin Scott and Delilah Dawson and a whole bunch of other people, and just it's the consistent, like, same energy, same vibe that everybody gives about how much they love Star Wars. So it's been absolutely fantastic. So we appreciate it.
Well, you are very welcome, and thank you so much for having me on the show, and thank you so much for getting books into the hands of readers who might otherwise not get it. That is an incredibly honorable thing to do, and I salute you guys. That's fantastic.
We appreciate that. It's all because of our patrons. Like, it sounds cheesy, but like it really is people putting in the time and effort and money to support us, and wonderful creators like you who are willing to support that, and we just get to be the conduits of it. So it's a lot of fun.
You're very welcome, and you're always welcome to hit me up for books if you need them.
Well, I'm going to hold you to that. Don't tempt me with a good time. Is there anything kind of in closing that you can talk about that you want to plug, whether it's Star Wars or not, or where people can find you to keep up with those things?
Sure. So I'm mostly on Instagram and Threads. That's probably where you can find me. And my website's lydiakang.com. And I do have 2 books coming out next year. They are not Star Wars books. One of them is a book on pseudoscience, and that's coming out in March, where we talk about things like Bigfoot and flat Earth and lie detector tests and why they don't actually work. And then I have another book called K. Jane. That's a young adult contemporary novel, and that's coming out next fall with Quill Tree Books.
Awesome. Is both ranges of the spectrum. I absolutely love it.
I am all over the freaking place. I cannot stay in one lane. That is the problem that I have. So
it's a problem you are excellently solving, I must say.
I'm trying.
So if you want more Clashing Sabers, of course, you can follow us on all of our socials, which is at Clashing Sabers, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, all of those places. We are there. Of course, you can go to our website, clashingsabers.net, if you want to find out more about what we do as a nonprofit, if you want to read some of our meta-analysis articles, or if you want to join our Patreon or nominate a teacher to get books sent to. It is the beginning of the school year. Teachers are going back. I know Amanda's in service. I started my first week this week. So support a teacher. You know, if your kid's starting in a new classroom, get them a box of books. We really want to be able to start off the school year right for these kids and around the country. So wherever you are, make sure you take a minute and go over and do that. It says nomination, but you're getting books. If you send us a person to get books, we are going to find a way to get them books. So don't worry about that. It takes about 2 minutes to do, and it's going to change some lives. So make sure you go and do that. Drew, Davor, if they want to find you fine gentlemen on the interwebs, tell them where they can do that.
Yeah, sure. Best place to find me is probably still just over on our Facebook group, Star Wars Clashing Sabers, where we post all the everything that we're doing and updates on who's getting books. So yeah, I'll just echoing what Brandon said. When you put in a teacher's name and address, we contact them and we send them stuff. That's the process. There's no hidden steps or nothing like that. So if you are a teacher, if you know a teacher, if you had a teacher, let us send them something fun.
All right, and if you want to follow me, you can do so over on X at A Large Review Pod. You can also listen to me as a co-host on Space Swifties, a Star Wars and Taylor Swift podcast that I host with my wife, the one and only Meg Dowell.
Guys, so don't tell anybody this, but I think I know what the next book is that Lydia Kang is going to be writing.
Uh-oh.
Oh my god.
It's going to be all about Batch 8.
I hope.
All Clashing Sabers productions are the intellectual property of the Clashing Sabers Network and ClashingSabers.net. All licensed sounds and images are the property of their respective copyright holders and are used for informational and educational purposes only. For more information on our nonprofit or to nominate a teacher, go to ClashingSabers.net. For questions or inquiries, please email us at ClashingSabersNetwork@gmail.com.
You're just going to walk away?